We often talk about diagnostics progress globally, but when you look closely, the reality is more uneven than we would like to admit. The challenge is not awareness anymore. It's implementation. Something remarkable is happening in global health right now. Diagnostics, long treated as the invisible backroom function of healthcare, are finally moving into the center of policy, politics, technology, and even national security. For decades, global health conversations focused on medicines, vaccines, hospitals, and treatment. But COVID-19 changed something fundamental. The world suddenly realized you cannot respond to a health crisis you cannot detect. And today, diagnostics are no longer viewed simply as laboratory tools. They are increasingly becoming a strategic infrastructure. In 2023, World Health Assembly passed a landmark resolution on strengthening diagnostic systems. And now, in 2026, we are beginning to see what real movement looks like. It's not perfect progress, not fast enough progress, but real movement. At the same time, one of the clearest messages emerging from global experts is this: diagnostics are not a quick fix problem. Diagnostics are a 30 to 50-year systems transformation, because you are not just buying machines, you are building workforce pipelines, financing systems, digital infrastructure, you are building regulatory frameworks, supply chains, governance, and political commitment. Diagnostics used to be almost invisible in high-level discussions. But today, we note the landmark resolution on strengthening diagnostics capacity that was adopted at the 76th World Health Assembly. The WHO has also established a diagnostics task force. A global diagnostic coalition is emerging. In fact, it had its first meeting late last month. Countries are building essential diagnostic lists, and diagnostics are increasingly linked to pandemic preparedness, to antimicrobial resistance, AI, to universal health coverage, and to industrial strategy. This is a profound shift. But the update from the Lancet Commission review makes an important observation. The world is currently making progress on policy and governance than it is on implementation and access. In simple terms, we are getting better at organizing the system faster than we are fixing the system. And that distinction matters because diagnostics are fundamentally a systems problem. Think about diagnostics like air traffic control. Without coordinations, planes would collide, visibility would disappear, routes fragment, and the system would become dangerous. The same thing happens in healthcare. And increasingly, some countries are beginning to understand diagnostics differently. Not only as a healthcare infrastructure, but diagnostics as an economic infrastructure. India invested heavily in diagnostics and pharmaceutical manufacturing. South Korea became a major force in imaging innovation. And experts are increasingly arguing that diagnostics should be viewed similarly to telecommunications, for example, energy systems, or even semiconductor manufacturing. Because diagnostics do not only improve healthcare outcomes, they influence productivity. They influence economic resilience, workforce participation, as well as national security. The countries moving fastest are often the ones that are aligning diagnostics with the broader national strategy. Whilst there has been all sorts of forward movement, the one statistic that has not shifted much remains crucial. Approximately half of the world, nearly 47% of the world's population, lacks the most basic level of diagnostics. This is staggering. Consider an idea of running a modern economy where half of the population lacks internet access. This is the diagnostic gap. Alternatively, think of navigating global healthcare in a broken GPS. You are traveling, yes, but without sight to dangerous elements around you. And diagnostics are so important because they are a gateway. Before treatment, before surgery, before antibiotics, and before cancer therapies, even before a health sector can respond through public health channels, comes diagnostics first. A health system cannot function in an intelligent manner without being able to diagnose accurately. And this is why diagnostics are becoming less about laboratories, but more about the capability to visualize, the visibility itself. One of the quiet but deeply important revolutions happening globally is the rise of National Essential Diagnostic Lists, or NEDLs. Think of them as a country's official must-have diagnostics inventory. Alternatively, you can view them as the officially established diagnostic list of absolute necessity. The World Health Organization has encouraged countries to establish such lists, and this initiative has seen considerable success. Countries such as India, Nepal, Nigeria, Ethiopia have successfully established their national essential diagnostic lists, and more recently, Zambia and others. Other countries such as Honduras, Indonesia, Thailand, Timor-Leste, and a lot closer to home, such as Burkina Faso, Gabon, Cameroon, with support from the regional partners like ASLM and funding from the Global Fund, have actually started the process. Now, this might look or appear quite bureaucratic. However, this is really quite transformational, as historically, procurement of diagnostics has usually been fragmented. It has been dependent on donors, it has been distorted politically, or even motivated commercially. Having an NEDL forces countries to think about one of the fundamental questions, which is, which diagnostics are absolutely necessary for our case? In many ways, this acts as a sovereign register of a nation's health system. In a sense, this becomes the country's definition of these are the minimum diagnostic rights to be available to its citizens. And what makes NEDLs especially important is that they can actually become a foundation for broader health systems reform, workforce management, procurement, regulatory control, funding, quality assurance, or even lab networks. So diagnostic lists, in a way, become the very foundation for systems. One of the strongest themes emerging globally is integration. Diagnostics are no longer viewed as isolated tests. They are increasingly being viewed as connected diagnostics. The WHO has linked the essential diagnostic list with the medical devices database. They have updated the priority medical devices information system, which is an open access electronic database of medical devices. They have strengthened laboratory network coordination and connected diagnostics more directly to universal health coverage. And regional organizations such as ASLM and Africa CDC have followed suit. This matters because disconnected diagnostics create inefficiencies everywhere. You may have machines that cannot communicate, laboratories disconnected from surveillance systems, data trapped in silos, or fragmented procurement systems duplicating costs. The future is increasingly moving towards what experts call connected diagnostics. And I love this analogy because connected diagnostics are becoming the trade clearinghouse of healthcare data. The goal here is simple. Information should move as efficiently as money, because delayed information costs lives. And increasingly, this connectivity is extending beyond hospitals. Now we have battery-powered devices, portable imaging, smartphone-supported diagnostics, we have cloud-connected systems, AI-supported workflows. All of these are beginning to push diagnostics to communities. That is at the last mile, the primary healthcare where they are needed the most, which, in my opinion, may ultimately be the only realistic way to close the diagnosis or access diagnostic gaps. AI-enabled diagnostics may be the most transformative development of all. You see, the Lancet review highlights how rapidly AI is expanding across imaging and radiology. In fact, most FDA-authorized AI medical tools are now concentrated in radiology. Why? Because imaging faces a severe global health shortage. The world simply does not have enough specialists. So AI is increasingly functioning like a synthetic second expert, not replacing clinicians, but augmenting visibility. Think of it like a tired pilot gains a digital co-pilot during turbulence. But in some regions, AI may become something even more significant, possibly a substitute for workforce capacity that simply does not exist. In areas where we have severe shortages of radiologists, pathologists, laboratory scientists, and clinicians, AI may become the only scalable path to expanding diagnostics access rapidly. And the implications are enormous. Imagine rural clinics, limited specialists, handheld ultrasound, AI-supported interpretation, cloud-connected systems, portable testing platforms that could fundamentally change access. But there is also a real risk, because AI could either democratize diagnostics or it may centralize power even further into countries and companies that are already controlling the technology. Now, the outcomes would depend less on the algorithms themselves, but more on governance, affordability issues, regulation, digital infrastructure, and political leadership. Technology alone will not solve the inequity. It is systems that will. One of the clearest messages emerging globally is that workforce may be the single greatest bottleneck in diagnostics. The world may nearly need 1 million additional diagnostics professionals, as we have seen from the Lancet Commission. And the current model, unfortunately, may simply be too slow for the scale of this challenge. In many systems, specialist diagnostic trainings can take years, sometimes up to a decade, which raises a very, very difficult question. Can the world solve a workforce shortage using models designed for another era in the past? Increasingly, experts are discussing multidisciplinary diagnostic training. They are discussing task shifting, shorter competence-based programs, and AI-supported workflows, because machines do not run themselves. You can purchase equipment, you can deploy AI, you can build laboratories, but without trained people, systems remain fragile. And this challenge becomes even more urgent in low and middle income countries, as well as fragile settings. Exactly where diagnostics matter most, systems are often the weakest. In some conflict settings, humanitarian laboratory programs have unfortunately already shut down because of funding cuts. And I keep coming back to this image. In conflict zones, diagnostics are like a lighthouse during a storm. But too often, the lighthouse goes dark exactly when visibility matters. Another major reality is the world still has not solved diagnostics affordability. And that may sound surprising. Global systems for improving medicine affordability have existed for decades. Pooled procurement, global financing mechanisms, pricing negotiations, and coordinated purchasing. But diagnostics are still far behind in all these facets. In many countries, diagnostics remain heavily dependent on out-of-pocket spending, fragmented procurement, donor financing, and inconsistent reimbursement systems. And experts increasingly argue that this ultimately is a political problem, because progress accelerates when governments decide that diagnostics matter. Will shapes investment. It shapes workforce expansions. It shapes manufacturing strategy. Political will shapes reimbursement systems and also shapes regulations. And this is why the emerging global diagnostic coalition matters, because diagnostics have lacked something vaccines and medicines have already had. They have lacked that central coordinating ecosystem. So the coalition aims to align stakeholders, coordinate strategy, support countries, strengthen systems, and sustain momentum. And this could be that turning point. That is, if the coalition can move beyond declarations and become a genuinely operational coordinating force. Because perhaps the clearest lesson emerging globally is this: fragmentation has failed. Fragmented procurement, fragmented laboratory systems, fragmented financing, fragmented regulation, fragmented digital infrastructure. The future of diagnostics depends on whether countries can build connected systems instead of isolated technologies. So where are we globally now? I would summarize it this way. The world is finally recognizing that diagnostics are not peripheral infrastructure, but a foundational infrastructure. Diagnostics determine whether outbreaks are detected early, whether antibiotics are used correctly. Diagnostics determine whether cancer is diagnosed in time. They determine whether universal coverage becomes real and whether health systems can function intelligently at all. But the next phase is harder, because political recognition is easier than operational transformation. It is easier to launch a coalition than to staff our laboratories. It is easier to publish a diagnostic list than ensure tests are available consistently. It is easier to build AI than to build equitable systems. And perhaps the real question now is this: can the world translate visibility into access? Can health systems see outbreaks early enough, see cancer before it spreads? Can they see antimicrobial resistance before it accelerates? Can they see patients before systems fail them? In modern healthcare, visibility determines action. And increasingly, visibility determines resilience. Thanks for listening to Inside Diagnostics. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with colleagues, and join us as we continue to explore the systems, leadership, and ideas that shape the future of diagnostics and laboratory medicine globally. Until next time, because in the end, systems do not implement themselves, but people do.